Hi again then guys, and welcome back to what has proved to be one of the most popular, if not the most popular review series of my channel. It was my first review series of a structured nature, Spirit of Le Mans, and I said in the last episode that the series was pretty much over unless Polyphony added new Le Mans cars to the game. And in one of the episodes, I believe at least one or two people asked me, would I be including the DeltaWing in this series? And I said basically no, but I would be including it in a future, possibly GT style series that would include more cars which are more relevant to the DeltaWing, like the Lister Storm or vehicles like that, more of a GT1 kind of category rather than full-on prototypes. Because at the end of the day, as unique and as good as the DeltaWing could potentially be, it just doesn't have the sheer spec to take on something like an Audi R10 or a Pascalo. So I didn't plan on including it in the series. However, at the end of the day, the DeltaWing is a prototype. And it did run in the Le Mans, in its own category of the prototype class. And it runs frequently in various forms in the ALMS. So technically, it is a prototype. And as such, I've decided that yes, I am including this car in the Spirit of Le Mans series. Now, we'll be including the 2013 version for now. I may include the older version in a future episode, possibly not, because it is an inferior car, and I feel like most people buy this version anyway, so no promises there. I may include the other version, maybe not. And the reason why I brought this series back to life is basically because pretty soon on GT6 we are due to be receiving another what would seem to be Le Mans prototype, the Hyundai N2025 Vision GT car, which could give the Mazda LM55 potentially a great run for its money, dependent of course on how fast it is and whether or not we can tune it. I am really hoping that we can tune it, but after the Nissan Nismo GTR and the Zytek were such abysmal failures in terms of tuning potential, my hopes aren't all that high. So for now, let's consider the DeltaWing, both from its own unique point of view, but also compared to its rivals, the other prototypes of GT6. So, as always, let's first of all go to our city track to begin the review. Now, one of the first things that you notice after purchasing and tuning the DeltaWing is just how strangely high the PP is. It's around 740 PP, which is beyond almost any other prototype, and that seems really strange, considering that it has only around half, or in some cases even the best part of a third, of the power of some of the other prototypes. Now, yes, it does weigh less, but having that much less power and torque and straight line performance makes it seem all the more strange that the PP is so ridiculously high. Now, I actually retuned this car recently and found that by making a few very tiny adjustments, I was actually able to make this car go from being almost undrivable to actually surprisingly good. Now, for low speed handling, I'm actually going to give this car a 5 out of 5. That is the difference that my new tuning has made. It's gone from being virtually useless to me to being actually one of the best handling cars I own, which really shows that the car does have that potential. Now, for city tracks, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 because it's very nimble due to its very narrow front end and lightweight, but still it's not anywhere near the pace of many of the other prototypes. It's not far off, say, a Panos or a TS30 hybrid, but most of them it can't keep up with. So now let's see how it fares on a technical track. Now, straight off the bat, spoilers ahead, because this track type is by far where this car shines the most out of our three types. It feels good on a city track, but it really does shine on technical tracks. Tracks which require more mid-range speed, more of your mid-range handling, more braking power rather than pure performance, and a flow from corner to corner. Now, obviously, that said, it's still not on the same pace as a full-on prototype. But it's still very good and still very quick, especially for a vehicle of its power and torque. It's pretty much unrivaled in that regard. Now for mid-range handling, I'm actually going to give it again a 5 out of 5, like on city tracks for low-speed handling, because with this new tune setup, with a few very minor revisions, it's amazingly good, far better than I ever thought it could be. Now for acceleration, I'm going to give the car a 3, because it's definitely not slow. It can keep up with, say, the GTR Nismo or the Zytek or the TS30 Hybrid even, but not very much above that. And for this track overall, I'm actually going to give it its best rating of the 3, a strong 5 out of 5, because it feels fantastic on this track. The handling really is perfect for Ascari, and by extension for technical tracks of a more mid-range performance level in general. For the brakes as well, I'm going to give it a strong 5, because they have so little weight to deal with that they do an excellent job. And I would actually recommend increasing the rear brake bias to 6, because it really does slow down the car even quicker whilst keeping the car straight and true, in check, and stops it from lunging. So now let's see how it can take on a high-speed track. How then does the DeltaWing fare on a high-speed track? Because as we already said, it does have notably less power than most of its rivals in the prototype class. In fact, than all of its rivals in the prototype class, pretty much, apart from perhaps the Zytek, where it's not so much of a difference. But apart from that one LMP2 exception, this car really falls behind in terms of overall sheer spec. Well, it's kind of good and bad in terms of high-speed performance, because for its power, it's an extremely fast car. The top speed is around the 270 mph region, but in the prototype class, there are very few places where this car can actually reach that speed, especially on tracks that require cornering, because you cannot achieve that speed with an amount of downforce that would be conducive to regular tracks. It just wouldn't handle both at the same time. You have to choose whether you want that top speed or whether you want handling. Now overall, for high-speed tracks, I'm going to give it a 3, because although it's not bad, it's just not competitive enough to warrant use. Now against vehicles of its own power, it's fantastic, but against a fully tuned prototype, it just doesn't stand a chance. Now that said, it can lap this track in around the similar kind of time as the Panoz GTR1. So pretty impressive considering that that car has double the power. Overall then, the DeltaWing is a little bit too niched for its own good, but I'll get into that more in the final summary. But for top speed, I'm giving the car a 3. In the broad scheme of things, that's pretty much where it falls against most of the other prototypes. And for high-speed tracks, as I said, it's a 3. And for high-speed handling, I'm going to give it a 4. So not quite a 5 for high-speed handling, because it does feel a little bit heavier than I would like for high speeds. So now let's go back to the garage for a summary. Overall then, the DeltaWing is kind of a hard car to review, because in its own way, it's brilliant. For its power, the performance is fantastic, and for a vehicle of its overall spec, PP notwithstanding, it's pretty much a completely dominating car. But that's the problem. It's dominating because it has virtually no rivals. The only real rivals that it has are potentially the Zytek LMP2 car or the other DeltaWing. Apart from that, there isn't really anything else that's a legitimate rival. So it's a fantastic car if you consider it as a standalone vehicle, and as an advancement of technology, which anyone who follows my channel will know I'm a huge proponent of, it's a fantastic car from that point of view. It tried something new and it proved that it could be effective. But in the broad scheme of things, against other prototypes, it's just not fast enough. And the handling, although fantastic for it on its own, just cannot achieve the same kind of lap times, regardless of its power, than other vehicles can. So, as an overview, would I recommend buying the DeltaWing? Would I recommend racing the DeltaWing? And if so, when would I recommend using it? Well, I would certainly recommend buying it. It is a very expensive car, it's 2 million credits, but really you're not paying for what it can do. You're paying for it because of how unique it is, how radically different its design and technology and mythos of the car is to anything else in the game. And for that, I would say it is worth the money. In the broad scheme of things, I wouldn't recommend using it that much. Be very selective about when you choose to use this car. As I kind of alluded to earlier on in the video, I would actually recommend using it the most, perhaps surprisingly on a technical track where it really does shine. And my biggest piece of advice, if you do plan to use the car for racing, regardless of whether it's the 2013 or the 2012 version, is, as well as I already mentioned, increasing the rear brake bias to 6, I would also recommend setting your differential to the lowest initial torque, the highest acceleration, and a braking bias of 20. You will be shocked at what those minor changes can make this car capable of. I would recommend using a bit of camber, and of course for track use, the maximum downforce. But overall, it's completely unique among the game's lineup, and if you're looking for something challenging at the very least, then I would recommend giving this car a go. And as a tabulation of all of its scores put together, it gets an overall rating of a pretty impressive 4.2 out of 5. So, that's it for this episode, and I'll probably see you guys again when we receive the new Hyundai N2025 on the game, which should hopefully be sometime this month, but with polyphony, you never can tell. So, that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.